Across Australia, after a 10-year campaign, a referendum was held in 1967. 90% of the country voted yes to have Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples counted as Australians for the first time. 25 years later, in 1992, what is now known as Mabo was handed down in the High Court. The landmark decision to recognise native title. This is how Mareeba community remembers these important milestones in the reconciliation process.
Why do we have to have a referendum on us to be counted in the census? We are the first Australians. We shouldn't have to be. That's an insult for us. We should be just counted in the census and without any voting system or not.
Very oppressed. Very oppressed. We're on what they call a council reserve. Well, that's was classed as council reserve. And majority of Indigenous people at the time were based there.
Here, especially in Mareeba, we had problems even getting into public place. It sort of like it was still a bit segregated. And the only thing that our school, they couldn't do that. They had to had no choice but to put us in the same class with the white kids.
I mean, when we went to the movie theatre, the blacks sat one side, the whites sat one side.
Mareeba, you had to hold your own all the time. You've always got a lot of racial prejudice going on around the place, you know. People were always slinging off at the blackfellas. And
if you went somewhere without getting permission from the police, then you're locked up.
I wasn't sort of really interested in referendums or anything at that time, but then I picked up a lot about Aboriginal people and how they were treated from the colonial days right up to now. And when they talked about the Constitution, we weren't even recognised in the Constitution until that referendum came up in 1967. We were then free citizens in our own country.
It was something that meant a lot to the elders, for them to be recognised because they was classed as flora and fauna. They weren't classed as humans or citizens or inhabitants. They was classed as flora and fauna, and it meant a lot, meant the world to them.
I remember the difficulties that many of those people had because they worked for many years as stockmen and timber getters and others, and they were confined under the Act, which meant that their wages were given to the local policemen to be kept for them. A lot of that money notionally appears to have disappeared.
I had been working out in the bush with lots of other Aboriginals who were just as good as me, but they weren't getting the money that I was getting, and that was not fair.
Because the wages a lot of us been working for around here was just nothing, just peanuts.
It could be related to the slave trade, because they had people who were working full time, working hard, working as stockmen or whatever else that they were employed in.
I started work at 15 and I started paying taxes right up to 67. Then I realised, hey, I'm not an Australian, I'm not a citizen, I'm not counted in the census. I thought it was disgusting. It was an insult, yeah, in our own country that we weren't counted in the census.
If the referendum had happened 100 or even 150 years earlier, there would have been less upheaval.
It was really important for my parents to go and vote for that time, because at that time my mum and dad was under the Act, and they got their freedom in 1945. And so life wasn't very easy for them from the beginning, and for them to go and vote for a yes vote would have changed their whole life. Well, they had a voice. They can do what they're supposed to do as a family man and mother.
And now we're going to have a vote to accept Aboriginal people back as as people of this country. And then when it happened, and it was a good thing. It's at that time that yes, They didn't recognise us because we just left a few years, but 5 years earlier, we just left the Mana Mana mission. We came here, and now we got our rights. Now we was free. Before if you had to go somewhere, you had to ask the superintendent to move. But now these things have happened. Now you're free to go anywhere.
I grew up with that anger, because we wasn't allowed to do anything,
Anyone who spoke out of turn was considered a troublemaker. So if you spoke up for your rights and you wanted equal rights, you were a troublemaker, you was moved on to the next community. See, my old man, he was a black activist, and he went around Australia, him and probably 8 more fellas that was beside him. They went all over the place fighting for Indigenous people.
The black power and everything coming into that was working towards that referendum thing,
When we look back at history, we're proud. I'm proud. I'm proud of the fact that Faith Bandler and her crew got together and did something that was historic. But it made a change for Aboriginal people right across the board, that we could participate, not look on the outside looking in and thinking we're not the same as everyone else. This brought us and gave us not equal rights, but it made us feel as if we had equal rights.
Stands out in our history as being a real game changer of how a community can come together and say, look, this is just unworthy. You can't do this to people. You can't leave a group of people who isolated.
Yeah, it was quite exciting, but we had to make sure we read the paper first before we put yes down, so we could understand what we were saying yes for. So it was a relief when 91% came through for that referendum. Questions on this form, on this ballot paper, whether it's yes or no, so the top one is no and the bottom one is yes. If we approved it, put yes on the bottom square.
Mum and Dad told me, okay, and we now counted in the census as being Australian citizens.
I felt free, and I felt like if I was just as good as that person over there standing up. Before that, we had to stand up behind people. And like I'm saying, when I do talk about things like that, I get emotional because it was a struggle for us. No one, I don't think anyone, no non-Indigenous people would know what Aboriginal people had to go through to be recognised. And with the referendum today, we feel at peace.
It was a great feeling to know that the majority of Australians voted, even like Indigenous and non-Indigenous people voted yes. It was a great feeling to think that something's happening, a better change for the people.
This is the first time I ever walked into a home in 1970, and I was living next door to non-Indigenous people, and they treated me with respect, and I felt really happy about that. Plus, I didn't have to hide no more and hide down at on the top of the Granite Creek.
Any Aboriginal from 67 on who was interested in politics enough and get the support could become Prime Minister of Australia.
For the first time, Australia has recognised the legal existence of Aborigines prior to white settlement. The case is a moral victory, as well as having great significance for land rights. European settlement of Australia was based on the premise of terra nullius, which basically means no person's land. Now, more than 2 centuries later, the High Court has recognised there were people here and their descendants have rights.
Eddie Mabo was the leader at that time that went and challenged the government over land right issues up there. And it's a good thing because it's paved the way for mainland Australia with Aboriginal rights and their land rights and native title rights and everything else also.
People recognise what he has done for the Torres Strait and Aboriginal Island people. Terra nullius is dead, it's gone. That's what he's proven.
He later became a groundsman at the James Cook University, and while he was there he had the term or statement terra nullius, and not coming from a very background where he was aware of those terms, he asked people what that meant, and they said, well, there was no inhabitants in Australia before Cook. Then got support that if he could present his case and take him back to the island and establish a case on the island, then he would take that to the High Court in Brisbane.
It was the ideal case, if I might put it that way, to bring to the High Court to raise the consciousness of the country and say, why are we denying these people who traditionally have owned this land? They've been there for all this time. They know it's theirs.
It opened up a new ball game in politics, especially with the Australian government, to justify what was ours. The whole Torres Strait Island people and the native people, the Aboriginal people of this country. It gave the world a big picture that we was here. There's no one else here but us, Torres Strait Islanders and the Aboriginal people.
You could see how it really, struck the chord and the heart and shook the foundations of the political world, because after the decision was made and the political people of the indigenous world then said, well, we got a legal foothold in this land.
Today, you've got all traditional owners heading back out to their country, and it means a lot to them. I suppose if it wasn't for Eddie Mabo, I think.
We can claim our land back, something that we've looked for years to go for, and it gives us a feeling of knowing who we are and where we come from.
Mabo made a good headway for us and for the Aboriginal people.
Even though there's a lot of gates and fences and boundaries out on the land, that means nothing to us, because the spirituality of the land and to us goes beyond fences and boundaries and borders of mankind.
And it's not nice when the government say, oh, we're buying the land back for you to go and live on it or do something with it or make employment for your people. You're handing the land back to us, but just on your basis.
Land rights for me is very important. I was sick and tired of walking on my land and a white man come running down on a truck or a horse and saying, get off my land. So now we've got rights on that land there now. Well, he come down here chasing us with a horse, and you want to watch out for it, because we'll chase him back, because our rights are recognised now through the Native Title Act.
I think the next step with the reconciliation, the government should be listening to the Aboriginal people, what they want. But the government is not listening to us. They need to clean their ear out of that. And I think after that, they might listen to the Aboriginal people then.
I want to be treated like a normal human being, without all this rubbish, racist and that, Just treat us like human beings, and we are, whether Australia likes it or not, we are part of Australia, and we play a big part of Australia. We are the first Australians, and we should be treated that way.
This is our land. We've been here for over 50,000 years, or more. Yeah. So that's what I said. The government should recognise that.
In Canada and in New Zealand, they have treaties, but you can still see the oppression. You can still see the playing field is not equal.
Certainly there's a long way to go to heal the past. The stolen gen history, whatever happened to us, has not seen a lot of people move on. They may not have been directly affected, but indirectly it has affected them long term. And what we see is with the chaos and what's happening with our mob today, certainly has affected a lot of other people. So you can't undo what's already been done, but how do we move forward? How do we move forward and try to bring everyone up so that they all feel able to participate, they all feel part of society and feel good about who they are?
Once you sort out so that every child has got a bed to sleep in, breakfast in the morning, a safe home to live in, has an education, an opportunity to look forward to, those things. The full use of the capacity of an individual. And every time you waste an individual, you waste that opportunity for the nation. So that at the end of the day, in 1 year or 5 years, we can look back from this day and say, we know what the problem was, we know how to fix it, and this is a 30-year roadmap to resolve this, so that that kids who are born today will in 30 years' time be in business or appropriately employed and raising their children in safety and good health.
We got to teach the younger generation now is take responsibility for their actions, and once that cycle is broken, that's the most important thing. You know, people throw these kids aside. No, got to mould them to be a better person.
Unless you give them some sort of affirmative action, they will continue to be in that cycle of poverty and disadvantage. And I don't think that in our society today that we should tolerate that.
I don't believe in jail, you know, sending these kids away. I believe in finding a solution to the problem.
In a nutshell, for me as an educator, I have seen some positive changes. There's even been recognition of Aboriginal studies in our curriculum, which wasn't there when I went to school. I see more opportunities for young people, and within that, I believe that the Indigenous children and the Indigenous young people certainly have a place within those opportunities that are offered there for them. It's important that they have role models that they can look up to and aspire to, and to be motivated by those role models and inspired by them. I think, yes, we need to make sure that we grow our young leaders, and that includes our Indigenous young leaders for this country.
That's what I'm concerned about, our future generation for our country. They're going to be our leaders, they are going to be our spokespeople. That's why we need to get into that constitution.
A constitution change or a treaty would be no use unless a real change to take place and the people will see it and feel it, where they can be able to get work and maybe own their own home.
The two Indigenous people and the non-Indigenous people, we are together today, but it has to be becoming more strong to come together and unite as one Australian, not divide. Yeah. There's still racism around. It'll always be here, but if we can come together and educate the ones that are here today, and for the next generation to come, we will see peace.
Black fella, white fella, it doesn't matter what your color, as long as you are a real fella, as long as you are true fella. All the people of different races and different lives and different places, it doesn't matter what your name is, we got to have lots of changes. We need more brothers if we're to make it, we need more sisters if we're to save it. Are you the one that's gonna stand up and be counted? Are you the one that's gonna be there when we shout it? Are you the one that's always ready with a helping hand? Are you the one who